Vivien Leigh was a woman the world believed could never break. Her face was flawless, her posture regal, her voice controlled with almost unnatural precision. When she appeared on screen as Scarlett O'Hara, audiences did not simply watch her, they absorbed her. Strength, defiance, survival. She became the embodiment of resilience at a time when the world desperately needed to believe in it. But the cruel irony of Vivien Leigh's life is this. The strength everyone admired was a role she performed, not a condition she lived. Behind the immaculate image lived a woman who was constantly negotiating with her own mind. Fame arrived not as fulfillment, but as exposure. Every glance became judgment. Every silence became suspicion. The world applauded her perfection while quietly refusing to see the cost of maintaining it. Vivien learned early that fragility was dangerous, so she hid it behind discipline, behind beauty, behind excellence. She worked harder than anyone around her, not out of ambition, but out of fear. Fear that if she ever slowed down, the instability inside her would surface. And in an industry that worshiped control, loss of control was unforgivable. The applause was endless. The loneliness was deeper. Scarlett O'Hara was written as a woman who survived everything. Vivien Leigh, the woman behind her, was never allowed that same grace. There was no script for mental illness, no patience for collapse, no understanding for pain that did not show itself neatly. This is not the story of a diva undone by fame. It is the story of a woman misread by history. Because Vivien Leigh was not destroyed by weakness. She was destroyed by the expectation that she must never show it. Vivien Leigh's rise was swift, dazzling, and unforgiving. When she was chosen to play Scarlett O'Hara, the decision did not merely elevate her career. It froze her identity in the eyes of the world. Overnight, she became more than an actress. She became a symbol, and symbols are not allowed to change. Scarlett O'Hara was fierce, manipulative, resilient to the point of cruelty. She bent circumstances to her will and survived by refusing to collapse. Audiences loved her not because she was kind, but because she was unbreakable. That admiration followed Vivien everywhere, quietly demanding that she embody the same endurance in real life. But perfection is a trap disguised as praise. Hollywood's gaze sharpened. Every performance was measured against her past triumph. Every role was expected to confirm the myth. Any vulnerability that did not fit the image was dismissed as temperament, exaggeration, or weakness. Vivien learned quickly that to remain adored, she had to remain flawless, or at least appear to be. She responded the only way she knew how, with control. She rehearsed obsessively. She corrected herself mercilessly. She chased excellence not for applause but for safety. In her marriage to Laurence Olivier, the illusion of perfection deepened. Together they were presented as a union of brilliance, the most glamorous couple of stage and screen. Yet intimacy lived under constant scrutiny. Their love was performed almost as often as their roles, leaving little room for privacy or rest. Vivien adored Olivier, but love could not shield her from the pressures pressing inward. Inside, something was tightening. Moments of exhilaration, intense focus, boundless energy, certainty, began to alternate with sudden exhaustion and despair. At first, these shifts were praised. She was called passionate, volatile, electric. No one asked why her extremes were growing more severe. No one asked what it cost to sustain them. The rise continued. Awards arrived, roles followed, but the trap had already closed. Because once perfection becomes expectation, there is no safe way to fail. And Vivien Leigh was standing at the center of a myth that left no space for illness, no patience for instability, and no mercy for a woman whose mind was quietly preparing to turn against her. Vivien Leigh's greatest enemy never stood across from her on a stage or behind a critic's pen. It lived inside her, unpredictable, relentless, and impossible to silence. Long before the world had words for mental illness, Vivien was already fighting it alone. Her mind moved in extremes. Periods of dazzling clarity and energy arrived like storms, carrying her through rehearsals with frightening intensity. She slept little, spoke quickly, worked obsessively. Directors mistook this for genius. Audiences mistook it for passion. No one asked what followed when the storm passed, because when it did, the collapse was brutal. Exhaustion swallowed her whole. Depression pressed against her chest until breathing felt heavy. Fear arrived without warning. She became withdrawn, suspicious, deeply ashamed of a condition she did not understand and was never taught how to explain. Today it would be called bipolar disorder. Then it was called instability, a word that carried judgment, not care. Hospitals entered her life quietly. So did medication. So did silence. Treatments were crude, often traumatic. They dulled her brilliance without offering peace. She feared losing herself, feared that without her intensity, she would become nothing. And so she resisted help even as she desperately needed it. On set, the strain became visible. Sudden absences, unpredictable moods, moments of confusion that terrified her more than anyone else. Whispers followed, not of illness, but of unreliability. The industry did not ask how to help. It asked how long it could tolerate her. Compassion was conditional, and patience was thin. Vivien felt humiliated by her own mind, betrayed by it, trapped inside it. She tried to mask the chaos with discipline, with elegance, with control, but the harder she fought, the more violently her mind pushed back. Every public appearance became an act of concealment. Every smile felt borrowed. What haunted her most was not the illness itself, but the knowledge that she would be blamed for it. In a world that celebrated strength only when it was effortless, Vivien Leigh was punished for struggling. And the more she tried to appear composed, the lonelier she became, drifting further away from the woman the world believed her to be, trying closer to a silence that no amount of applause could ever reach. To the public, Vivien Leigh and Laurence Olivier were not simply married. They were mythologized. Two brilliant figures, bound by talent, beauty, and ambition. Their love story was framed as inevitable, almost royal, a union destined to conquer both stage and screen. But myth leaves no room for illness, and legend has little patience for reality. Behind closed doors, love struggled to survive under the weight of expectation. Laurence Olivier loved Vivien, but he did not understand her illness, and neither did she. When her mood shifted, when her energy surged or collapsed, confusion replaced intimacy. Arguments flared without warning. Long silences followed. Each episode carved distance where closeness once lived. Vivien feared abandonment more than failure. She sensed that her instability made her difficult to love. So she tried harder, to be perfect, controlled, admirable. But effort could not cure illness, and devotion could not substitute for care. Fame amplified everything. The more the world adored her, the more isolated she felt. Applause became a wall rather than a bridge. People admired her strength without recognizing how carefully it was performed. They expected resilience as proof of worth, never realizing that resilience was costing her sanity. As her condition worsened, professional consequences followed. Studios hesitated. Directors worried. Insurance companies whispered. Vivien became a risk, not because she lacked talent, but because she could no longer guarantee predictability. And unpredictability, especially in women, was treated as a flaw rather than a symptom. Loneliness settled into her life quietly. She spent long hours alone, rehearsing lines that offered temporary structure. She clung to acting because it gave her rules, boundaries her mind could follow when everything else felt chaotic. On stage, she knew who she was allowed to be. Off stage, identity dissolved. Her marriage slowly fractured, not through betrayal, but exhaustion. Laurence moved forward. Vivien remained suspended between love and illness, admiration and abandonment. The world continued to call her iconic, but icons are not comforted. They are observed. And so Vivien Leigh lived surrounded by people, yet fundamentally alone, paying the price for an image that declared her untouchable, even as she was quietly falling apart. As the years passed, Vivien Leigh's life began to contract. The roles that once arrived effortlessly now came sporadically, wrapped in hesitation. Studios remembered her brilliance, but they feared her unpredictability. Admiration quietly turned into distance. The spotlight did not disappear all at once. It dimmed slowly, almost politely. Her health deteriorated on multiple fronts. Tuberculosis weakened her body. Mental illness exhausted her spirit. The combination was merciless. Physical illness fed emotional collapse, and emotional collapse deepened physical frailty. Each recovery was partial. Each return to work demanded more strength than the last. Vivien learned to ration herself, conserving energy, guarding her mind, choosing silence over confrontation. She still performed when she could, and when she did, the brilliance returned. Briefly. On stage, audiences witnessed flashes of the woman they remembered. Her voice remained precise. Her presence still commanded attention. But beneath the craft lived strain. Every performance carried risk. Every applause came with a private cost measured in exhaustion and fear. Off stage, her world grew quieter. Friends described her as gentle, reflective, deeply sensitive. She spoke openly at times about feeling misunderstood, about the loneliness of being admired for an image that no longer matched her reality. She felt suspended between past glory and an uncertain present, too famous to disappear, too ill to fully participate. Her marriage to Laurence Olivier was long over, but the echo of that loss remained. Love had once offered structure. Without it, days felt unanchored. She filled time with reading, solitude, brief social visits that rarely lasted. Crowds overwhelmed her. Silence both comforted and frightened her. The industry moved forward without her. New faces replaced old legends. The myth of Scarlett O'Hara remained, untouched, immortal. Vivien Leigh, the woman behind it, felt increasingly invisible. What hurt most was not the loss of fame, but the loss of understanding. There was no public language for what she endured, no framework for compassion. Her suffering was still misread as temperament, her illness still confused with weakness. And so she declined quietly, not in scandal, not in spectacle, but in a gradual retreat from a world that no longer knew how to hold her. Vivien Leigh will forever be remembered as Scarlett O'Hara, the woman who refused to break, who survived fire and ruin with defiance etched into her gaze. But that memory, powerful as it is, conceals a quieter truth. Scarlett was fiction. Vivien was human. Her life was not undone by lack of talent, nor by failure. It was undone by an illness she did not choose, and a world that did not know how to care. She lived in an era that demanded composure and punished collapse, especially in women whose beauty had been elevated to myth. Vulnerability was treated as flaw. Suffering was misunderstood as temperament. Vivien Leigh endured both with dignity that cost her dearly. She gave performances of extraordinary depth, not because she was fearless, but because she understood pain intimately. Every role carried echoes of her inner struggle. Every moment of brilliance was borrowed from a mind constantly negotiating with itself. What makes her story so haunting is not its tragedy, but its silence. There were no apologies from the industry that withdrew when she needed support most. No acknowledgement that admiration had replaced responsibility. No reckoning with the damage inflicted by expectation. She faded not because she was weak, but because she was exhausted. Today, Vivien Leigh stands as more than an icon of beauty. She is a reminder that mental illness does not negate brilliance, that strength is not the absence of struggle, and that legends are often built on lives that were never truly protected. The loneliness behind Scarlett O'Hara was real. It was lived. It was unseen. And in remembering Vivien Leigh honestly, we honor not just the roles she played, but the courage it took to survive a life that demanded perfection and offered little mercy in return.